At a lavish wedding in Italy, the groom's brother whispered. A true Italian wedding means a little forbidden passion. Even for the guests. I laughed, until I found him in the courtyard at midnight, locked in an intimate dance with a woman who wasn't his wife. When I confronted him, he smiled. It's just a cultural tradition. I smiled back, holding up my phone. Then you won't mind if I share it with your family? His face turned white as the music stopped. I never thought I'd witness a full-blown scandal at a wedding, let alone the wedding of the year in Italy. But here I am, still trying to process the fact that I saw a groom, on his wedding night, tangled up with another woman while his bride was inside laughing with their families. And the worst part? He didn't even look surprised when I caught him. Let's back up. I was invited to this wedding by my best friend, Matteo. His older brother, Luca, was the groom. The family was wealthy, not just comfortable, but the kind of rich where their vacation home is a centuries-old villa in Tuscany. The kind of rich where the guest list included minor royalty, and the florist flew in from Paris. This was the most extravagant, over-the-top, fairy tale wedding I had ever seen. And I was just there as a guest, completely out of place among all these beautiful, important people. At dinner, Matteo's other brother, Niccolò, leaned in and smirked. A true Italian wedding means a little forbidden passion. Even for the guests. I laughed, assuming it was just one of those things Italians say to sound mysterious. But something about the way he said it stuck with me. Hours later, that comment would make perfect sense, and I'd wish I had walked away from this whole mess before it swallowed me. The wedding itself was stunning. Old stone church, rolling vineyards, golden sunset, all of it straight out of a movie. The bride, Isabella, was breathtaking. She was one of those women who made everyone else look dull in comparison. And Luca? Well, he looked like the perfect groom, charming, confident, and completely at ease. At the reception, everything blurred into laughter, clinking glasses, and music floating through the warm night air. People were drunk on champagne, high on love, twirling under the stars like they were the only ones in the world. I wasn't a dancer, so I wandered off for some air, stepping into the courtyard behind the villa. The stone was warm under my hands, and for a second, I just stood there, enjoying the quiet. That's when I saw them. Luca, the groom, locked in an intimate, slow dance with a woman who was not his wife. My stomach dropped. They were standing under a dimly lit archway, the flickering lanterns casting soft, golden light over them. She was wearing a sleek silk dress, her back bare, her arms draped lazily around his neck. His hands, his wedding ring still shining, rested low on her waist, fingers tracing over the fabric like he'd done it 100 times before. I stood there, frozen, watching them sway together like the rest of the world had disappeared. He leaned in, murmuring something into her ear. She tilted her head, smiling, letting her fingers trail along his jaw before pulling him closer. And that was it. That was all I needed to see. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo. The click wasn't loud, but it was enough. Luca turned his head slightly, eyes catching mine in the dim light. And in that moment I saw it, recognition then irritation, but not a single trace of guilt. For a split second he didn't move. Didn't let go of her. He just stared at me, completely calm. Then, slowly, he smiled. It's just a cultural tradition, he said smoothly, like we were discussing wine. A cultural tradition. I smiled back. And then I raised my phone. Then you won't mind if I share it with your family? His face went white. The woman pulled away instantly, her hand flying to her mouth. For the first time, she looked scared. I could see it. She knew exactly who he was, what this meant, how badly this was about to go. The music from inside was still playing, but suddenly it sounded distant. Like I was standing in the eye of a storm, everything too quiet, too still, right before it all collapses. Luca took a step toward me, his whole body tense, but before he could say another word, Niccolò appeared. And he was grinning. That smug, lazy grin that made it very clear he had expected this to happen. You walked right into it, huh? He mused, sipping his drink. I turned to him, my pulse hammering. You knew. He gave a casual shrug. I might have had an idea. I wanted to hit him. But I didn't have time, because at that exact moment, Isabella stepped outside. She had no idea what she was walking into. She was still glowing, laughing, the happiest bride in the world. And then her eyes landed on her husband. On the other woman. And on me. Her smile faltered. I saw the confusion first, then the slow, creeping realization. She took one more step forward, eyes flicking from Luca's guilty expression to the woman's trembling hands, then finally to my phone clutched in my grip. Her whole body went still. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd scream. Maybe she'd start sobbing, demanding an explanation. But instead, she smiled. Not a real smile. A sharp, bitter, ice-cold smile. And then, she turned around and walked straight back inside. Right into the heart of the wedding. And the moment she stepped through those doors, the music stopped. The entire reception froze. Hundreds of heads turned toward her, glasses halfway raised, conversations cutting off mid-sentence. Matteo, already moving toward her, trying to reach her before she could, too late. Isabella lifted a glass of champagne, her hand rock steady. And in a voice that never wavered, she made a toast. To betrayal. To a love that only looks real when the lights are bright. To the groom, who was about to learn what it felt like to be the one left standing alone. And then, she threw the glass. It shattered at Luca's feet. And then, everything exploded. The second the glass shattered, the air changed. For a few painful seconds, no one moved. The silence was unbearable. 100 faces frozen in shock. A perfectly planned wedding, now crumbling like a house of cards. Then, Isabella turned to Luca. Say something. Her voice was steady, but her hands were curled into fists at her sides. She wasn't crying. She wasn't breaking down. She was waiting. Luca, the groom, the liar, the cheater, opened his mouth. I don't know what he planned to say, but it didn't matter. Because right then, his father stepped forward. What the hell is going on? And suddenly chaos erupted. People started whispering, then talking, then shouting. Chairs scraped, champagne sloshed over crystal rims. The perfect night imploded in front of my eyes. Someone grabbed my arm. Matteo. Eyes wide, panicked. What did you do? He hissed. I yanked my arm back. Me? I shot back. Your brother did this. I just caught him. That's when Luca moved. He stepped toward Isabella, reaching for her like he could somehow fix this. I say, let me explain. Explain? Her voice cut like glass. You want to explain? Maybe you can explain why my husband. She spat the word like it was poison. Was dancing with another woman on our wedding night. People gasped. Someone whispered. Oh my God! Luca's mother clutched her pearls like we were in a Victorian drama. His father, a powerful, terrifying man, looked like he was about to explode. And then, through the crowd, a voice rang out. It wasn't just dancing. I turned, and my stomach plummeted. The woman from the courtyard. She stood just inside the door, her face pale, her hands shaking. She was breathing hard, like she'd just run. She hadn't meant to speak. I could tell. She had blurted it out, and now she couldn't take it back. Every single person in the room turned to look at her. Isabella's voice was deathly quiet. What did you just say? The woman opened her mouth. No words came out. She looked at Luca. Begging. Terrified. Luca's face was like stone. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. Tell her, I said, stepping forward. I wasn't letting him get away with this. Tell her the truth. He said nothing. The woman let out a shaky breath. Then, finally, it's been going on for years. A gasp ripped through the room. Luca's mother staggered back. His father's face turned red. The crowd shifted like a living thing, buzzing with whispers. Isabella just stood there. Still. Silent. Then, she exhaled. And laughed. Not a happy laugh. Not even an angry one. It was cold. Hollow. The kind of laugh that makes your stomach turn. Of course. She wiped at her mouth, shaking her head. Then she looked at Luca like he was a stranger. Do you even love me? No answer. She nodded. Like that told her everything. Then, without another word, she reached down, took off her wedding ring, and set it carefully on the cake table. The meaning was clear. The marriage was over. Or it should have been. Because right then, Luca's father lost it. You idiot! He roared, shoving Luca backward. Luca stumbled, his mask cracking for the first time. He actually looked scared. Do you have any idea what you've done? His father bellowed. Do you have any idea who her family is? That's when I realized. This wasn't just about cheating. This was about power. Isabella came from money, just like Luca's family. But hers was older. Stronger. The kind of family that could make or destroy someone like him. And Luca? He had just set off a nuclear bomb. His father turned to Isabella, desperate. This doesn't have to end like this, Bella. Let's talk. She held up a hand. No. And then, she walked. Not out the door. Straight to me. The entire room held its breath. She stopped in front of me, her eyes locking onto mine. You saw, didn't you? She asked. I nodded. And you have proof. I held up my phone. The photo's still on the screen. She took it from my hand, looked at it for half a second, then turned it toward the crowd. This, she announced, is my husband. And then, she tossed the phone onto the floor. It hit with a sharp crack. Not broken, but loud enough to make a point. Then she turned back to Luca. "You are not my husband anymore." And with that, she walked out. The second the doors swung shut behind her, the entire room erupted. And I wasn't sure what the hell I had just started. The moment Isabella walked out, the entire wedding collapsed into madness. Guests started talking, no shouting. People who had been clinking glasses and laughing an hour ago were now whispering like vultures picking at a carcass. Luca's father was boiling over. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck, hands clenched into fists. He looked like he wanted to beat Luca into the ground. His mother was still frozen, staring at the spot where Isabella had stood, as if she could will time to rewind. And then, the woman. The one from the courtyard. She was still standing there shaking. She looked trapped. Like she realized she had just destroyed something she wasn't ready to lose. Niccolò, still standing beside me, let out a low chuckle. "Well?" he murmured, taking a sip of his drink. That escalated. I wanted to strangle him. Luca finally moved. He shoved past his father and grabbed the woman's arm, his voice low and furious. "You need to leave. Now." Her face crumpled. "Luca, please, now." He wasn't gentle. He practically dragged her toward the door, his grip tight on her wrist. That's when another voice cut through the noise. A woman's voice. "Oh, Luca, Luca, Luca! Still treating women like toys?" And out of the crowd, another woman stepped forward. This one blonde. Tall. Dressed in black. She was gorgeous, but there was something dangerous about her. Something that made people go quiet as soon as they saw her. Even Luca. His grip immediately loosened on the first woman. His face? Panic. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't just some guest. This wasn't a random +1. This was another one. Another woman. Another affair. The first woman, the brunette, turned slowly, eyes widening. "You!" she whispered, horrified. The blonde woman smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was sharp. Cruel. "Did you really think you were the only one?" And just like that, everything snapped. The brunette lunged. And suddenly, a full-on fight broke out in the middle of the reception. The two women, the mistress and the other mistress, clawed at each other like wild animals. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Tables knocked over, sending $1,000 floral arrangements crashing to the ground. And Luca? Luca just stood there. Frozen. Silent. For the first time all night, he had nothing to say. His father tried to step in, but Matteo, my best friend, grabbed me and yanked me backward. "We need to get out of here. Now." "Are you serious? We can't just, trust me." I followed him just in time. Because at that exact moment, another voice rose above the chaos. A deep, booming voice. "Everyone sit down." The entire room went still. Because standing in the doorway, blocking the exit like a wolf surveying a pack of sheep, was a man I had never seen before. But I knew, immediately, who he was. Isabella's father. And he did not look happy. The room had been loud a second ago. Now, it was silent. Every head turned toward the man in the doorway. Isabella's father. I had heard about him before. Alessandro De Luca. A name that carried weight. Powerful. Old money. Ruthless in business. And judging by the look on his face, just as ruthless in family matters. He took one slow step into the room. Then another. Every guest instinctively moved back. Even Luca, who had been standing there like a dazed fool, straightened his spine. His father, always the dominant force in a room, actually stepped aside. That's how you knew Alessandro was not to be messed with. His gaze swept the chaos. The overturned tables. The broken glass. The two women, one of them weeping, the other shaking with rage. Then, finally, he looked at his daughter's empty chair. His jaw tightened. "Where is Isabella?" No one answered. But it was clear from the way his eyes darkened, he already knew. Luca's father, finally regaining some control, stepped forward. "Alessandro, please." But the older man lifted a hand. A sharp, quick gesture. And just like that, Luca's father shut up. Alessandro turned his full attention to Luca. "My daughter walked out of here. Without a husband." His voice was calm. Too calm. "You will tell me why." Luca swallowed. I saw his throat bob. His hands trembled. Then, like a complete coward, he turned to his father. As if he could still be saved. But his father? His father looked at him like he was disgusted. Like he was no longer his son. Luca tried again. He looked to his mother. Her face was buried in her hands. He looked at Matteo. His jaw was clenched, eyes cold. He even glanced at Niccolò, as if the family's resident troublemaker might have his back. Niccolò simply smirked. You're on your own, fratello. That was it. Luca was alone. I expected him to try to explain. Maybe to grovel. Beg for mercy. But when he finally opened his mouth, he laughed. A small, bitter chuckle. You're all acting like I killed someone, he muttered, shaking his head. And then, as if he couldn't help himself, it was just a mistake. The words barely left his mouth before Alessandro moved. No warning. No hesitation. A fist to the face. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Luca stumbled back, clutching his jaw. His head snapped to the side, his lips split wide open. Gasps echoed. His mother screamed. His father didn't even flinch. Luca, stunned, wiped the blood from his mouth, eyes wide. Alessandro? He simply adjusted his cufflinks. That, he said, voice even, was for my daughter. And then he turned, ignoring Luca completely. Matteo. Matteo straightened immediately. You will take me to my daughter? Matteo nodded. Of course. He turned to me, gripping my arm. You're coming too. I didn't even hesitate. Because whatever was about to happen next, I needed to see it. We found Isabella outside the villa. She was standing alone, at the edge of the vineyard, barefoot in the grass. The wedding dress that had been pristine hours ago now looked heavy, ruined. The hem was stained with dirt, her curls had loosened, her makeup had smudged just enough to make her look like a ghost of herself. She must have heard us approach, but she didn't turn. Papa, she said, voice soft. Alessandro stepped forward. Isabella. Still, she didn't turn. You hit him, didn't you? She asked. He didn't answer. She exhaled, a small, shaky laugh. Good. I saw Alessandro's expression soften, just slightly. Come home, he said quietly. She finally turned, looking at him for the first time. No. A single word, but it carried weight. Alessandro frowned. No? I'm not going back. For the first time all night, he looked surprised. Isabella, be reasonable. You cannot stay here. There are guests, I don't care about them. She turned to Matteo, then to me. Her expression unreadable. I want to go away. Somewhere no one can find me. Matteo blinked. I say, I have money. She cut in. Enough to disappear. Alessandro stepped closer. You don't have to run. Let me handle this. Handle what? She snapped. That my husband was sleeping with not one, but two other women? On our wedding night? That my wedding is a joke? That my life, the one I was supposed to have, is gone? Her voice broke. And just like that, so did she. I saw it happen. The moment anger turned to grief. She covered her face with both hands, her shoulders shaking. The first real sob tore from her throat, and it was the worst sound I'd ever heard. Alessandro, the unshakable, the ruthless, looked wrecked. But he didn't reach for her. Instead, he looked at me. I wasn't expecting it. But suddenly, his attention was on me. You were the one who saw, weren't you? I nodded. And you took the photo. Another nod. He studied me for a long moment. Do you still have it? My pulse thumped. I swallowed. Yes. He exhaled. Then, calmly, send it to me. I hesitated. What are you going to do? His gaze sharpened. I am going to destroy him. A chill ran down my spine. I sent the photo. Alessandro's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen just once, then slipped it into his pocket. Thank you. Then he turned back to his daughter. Come with me, Isabella. She wiped her eyes, her breath still unsteady. She looked at me. What would you do? She asked. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because what the hell do you say to a woman whose entire life just shattered? Finally I said. I think you should leave before they convince you to stay. She nodded. Once. Then, finally, she stepped toward her father. And together they walked away. Luca's life ended that night. Not in the literal sense. But within a week, his father disowned him. Isabella's family made sure he would never work in their world again. His name became a warning, a joke, a cautionary tale. As for Isabella? She vanished. No one knew where she went. Not even Matteo. But wherever she was, I hoped she was free.